And struck the Dominator with full force, and it actually spun the Dominator 100 degrees because I didn't have the spike system deployed yet. But Will Claim 25 launched an air cannon with a miniaturized sensor into that tornado. So when I play this video, Will's going to pop out of the Dominator and shoot a t-shirt into the audience, so make sure you look for that. That thing is revved up with a lot of air pressure. But here is the video, and watch that suction vortex as it peels off the north side of the tornado. So there you can see the suction vortex. It started cutting right through the corn, did a left-hand turn, and then hit the Dominator head-on. And that vortex was moving at 60 miles an hour. And we measured 135 miles per hour northerly wind on the backside of the Dominator. And you can see the Dominator now is pointed off to the north. Corn stalk of the Dominator, I had the windows down. There you can see Will after the launch. And it actually threw us into the ditch. The vortex hit, and it was spinning so quickly that it felt like it went around about 5 times inside of that tornado. And at this time, the sensor was flying up through the tornado. There's a corn stalk in my lap. And we actually lost that sensor. We usually have live data that comes in, but that one surged up through the suction vortex and the tornado so quickly that we're actually still looking for it. And it has a bright red parachute. We think that it's somewhere to the north of Huntsville, Alabama. But that data set right there is the perfect data set because it's from the ground up. We shot it right out of the window of the Dominator. The parachute popped, and the wind did all the work, carrying it up through the suction vortex and into the tornado above it. And that would have been the perfect data set, but we just have to recover that sensor. But we have gotten about 5 to 6 rockets with miniaturized sensors inside of tornadoes, and we actually measured a 250 mile per hour wind just above the ground inside of the Weatherford, Texas tornado. This one right here, the vortex we computed to be moving at 60 miles an hour, and they rotate counterclockwise, so you have to add that speed to the right side of the vortex, and we measured 135 mile per hour wind with the anemometer on the back of the Dominator out of the north. So we had about a 240 mile per hour wind just to the east of the Dominator, and that was enough to spin it around in a circle. And we do have breaking news in the tornado space. We finally have an EF5 tornado, and this was upgraded from June 20th this year. It happened in eastern North Dakota near the town of Enderlin, North Dakota. And this is the F5 right here. The actual dynamic pipe or the tornado is inside that sheath of condensation right there. But whenever you see that perfectly laminar and circular cloud structure, you know that that's a big time tornado. And it also had that deviant path. See how it's turning off to the north, doing a cyclonic turn? That's very similar to the Greensburg, Kansas tornado that happened in May 4, 2007, that did that right over the town, did that left-hand turn. And that's called deviant motion. Basically, as the tornado is separating from the mesocyclone, it gets picked up by the southerly low-level jet, and then begins that very slow turn off to the north. And this was upgraded after the fact because they found a fully loaded tanker car from a train that was thrown 475 feet. So they assessed the winds that would do that would be about 230 miles an hour. So that's why it has the 210 plus mile per hour wind estimate on that. And it also did a lot of vegetation damage. It did a sandpapering effect to the trees and the trunks that were in the area, and they related that to EF5 intensity winds. But it is purely a damage-based scale, and we haven't had an EF5 in 12 years officially, and that's because if it doesn't hit anything at EF5 intensity or hit high-quality engineering at that level, then you can't justify an EF5 rating. So a mobile home can get totally wiped out by an EF2 tornado, so you can't really justify rating even when you're given total destruction out there. We were chasing that day on June 20th, and there was a pair of supercells that developed. We call them renegade cells, and they developed just ahead of a windbag or a derecho, a big line of convection that was coming, and we were on the northern of the 2 supercells, and it produced a big time tornado first, a big barrel tornado.
Back across the road.
This is it right here. We actually intercepted it when it first touched down.
Back it up if we want.
It's all in look. We gotta stay away from our back end.
The winds are about 100 miles an hour, even outside the funnel cloud here.
Right up on our tail.
They're just to the north of our location here, and the whole family was watching the live stream on the Dominator. And when we first intercepted it, it moved southeast and crossed the railroad tracks coming away from their home, and they thought they were okay. And then it planted like this, turned off to the north, the same deviant motion that the EF5 had, and then they saw it was heading straight for their house. So the whole family got into the basement, they put their entire weight up against the door, the house was shredded above them, there was glass coming underneath the door, and we drove up to the house right after the chase and immediately did search and rescue, and they were unharmed because they were in the basement. But that's when it's really intensifying right there. Very slow moving tornado, almost stationary. And if you intercept that tornado, we'd probably be in there for about 15 minutes getting hammered by 200-mile-per-hour winds. You can see the wraparound from the tornado here. That's our live stream. Will's holding the camera in the back of the Dominator. That's what the strongest tornadoes look like, those big barrel tornadoes.
Right on top of that. Those debris going crazy.
And this one is from Greenfield, Iowa. This was last year. And this is a classic multiple vortex tornado. This is a high-end EF4, and probably could have had an EF5 rating as well. But look at all those suction vortices just whipping around the inside of the tornado. You can even see a strong RFD on the south side of it. That's the rear flank downdraft. That's the downdraft that wraps around the tornado. And you can even have stronger winds sometimes outside of the tornado than within it. Not in this case though. These suction vortices here can produce winds of 2 to 4 times that of the parent tornado. So if this tornado has 200-mile-per-hour winds, the wind speeds in there can easily be 400 or 500 miles per hour and even approach the speed of sound in these multiple vortices. And this tornado is moving at about 50 or 60 miles an hour. We should have been chasing it in the Dominator 3, but on the way up to Iowa, we broke down in the Flint Hills of Kansas. We blew the turbo out of the Dominator, and we had to use a rental car on this chase. So we couldn't intercept it, but that was probably a savior for us because I don't think the Dominator 3 can handle the winds inside of a tornado like this. And all of that is cloud matter and some debris. The white vortices is just cloud matter because it's very low pressure and more easily condenses at the lower pressure. And then after that, with the rental car, I went down to western Oklahoma. We had a cedar tree come through the windshield, and then I took it down to West Texas and blew all the windows out in softball-sized hail. And now I'm actually on the do not rent list of all major rental car companies. But this multiple vortex tornado easily could have had winds approaching the speed of sound. You can see it downing all those wind turbines all around the tornado as well. There were explosions out there on the wind turbines. And here you can see rooster tails coming off of the structures even. That is as dirt and insulation gets injected into the tornado, causing condensation plumes. But all of that is caused as the tornado is interacting with the friction of the earth. If you have a really powerful tornado, the winds will cut in toward the low pressure, and then you can split up into about 3 to 5 different suction vortices spinning around the tornado. And they're all underneath the mesocyclone above it, so it's stretching the tornado, just like when a figure skater pulls in their arms, they spin a lot faster. The same thing is happening with the tornado here. So the wind cuts in toward the low pressure and splits it up into those miniature tornadoes that we call suction vortices. And that's why we need the Dominator 3, because that can turn an EF1 tornado into an EF5 in the blink of an eye, and can really ramp up in these most powerful of tornadoes. And the first time I saw these was on a supercell on May 4, 2007. That was in northwestern Oklahoma. I was chasing with Joel Taylor at the time, and that was also the same time as the Greensburg, Kansas tornado, the EF5 in 2007.
Hey, stop!
And here's the tornado. You can see it get a kink just above the ground.
Wow!
That's as it's interacting with the friction of the
Turn
earth.
off the windshield wipers! Turn off the wipers!
But it's just one vortex there until it starts to interact with the friction of the earth. We were going in reverse here. Very comfortable driving in reverse.
Hey, stop, we're good! Oh, no, don't go! Jesus Christ!
Joel had the doors open and put it in reverse and almost drove over my legs. And then it started to go to our east. And you can ramp this up a little bit. You can hear the roar of the tornado as the suction vortices form. And the tornado is surrounded by sinking air, basically a sheath of air that's descending. I like to pan up to cloud base. You see the clear sinking air around the tornado. But you can hear it roar as the suction vortices ramp up the winds, probably about 400 miles per hour in this. This is probably an EF5, but it didn't hit anything.
Oh no, the structures, no, no!
You can see the vortices just dancing around inside the tornado, and watch it flatten this tree with a sinking motion, and then it rips it out of the ground as the suction vortex hit the tree. There it goes. But that thing is probably about 50 feet wide at the base. These really compact tornadoes you have to watch out for. And this is a picture of the rental car that I used on the Greenfield, Iowa day, the high-end EF4. And you can see a spider crack on the right. That's where the cedar tree came through, and all of those dents are from the West Texas hailstorm. And when you get a rotating updraft like that with a supercell storm, it's a lot stronger, and they can suspend hailstones of baseball and softball size, and even up to 6 or 7 inches in diameter. The biggest one that I saw was 7 inches in diameter in Piedmont, Oklahoma in 2012. And I brought this to the rental car company and returned it. And the employee's son was a fan of Team Dominator and posted this on Reddit, and then it went viral, and they've been coming after me ever since. I think that AI has identified me as a high-risk client over the last 3 years or so. I've tried to use the name Teed Rimmer a few times, which didn't work. But this is what a big-time hail core looks like. This was in eastern Wyoming in 2018, and I was also in a rental car this day. I was in a Nissan Sentra. But if you're out on the road and you see a big milky hail core like this, it means you're about to get hammered by massive hail. And everything you see in these videos is how not to stay safe around hail. So you want to pull the car off to the side of the road, let the hail move over you. One thing I did in this case though is I pointed the rear of the rental car into the wind so it at least blew out all of the back windows. And that's what cows will do a lot of times when they're in storms. They group together, point their rear ends into the wind, and just ride it out. But here is the hail core. When you're driving toward it, it can actually accelerate the relative fall speed of the hail. You'll see cars go in the other direction, flashing their emergency lights at you, turn around. But this is all a supercell storm, and you have to get through the hail to get to the other side of the storm to see the tornado. But sometimes you can't do it. Sometimes the hail is just too large. I put gas station sunglasses on. I close the visor to try to deflect the shards into the floorboard. But this happened to a rental car in eastern Wyoming in 2018. Next slide. This is another one in West Texas with that rental car that I just showed you, the Ford Expedition. And in this one, you can see a ribbon of dirt on the horizon, and that's as the downdraft of the supercell is accelerating the hail into the ground. And you can actually get hail that falls faster than terminal velocity with these supercell storms, driven by the downdrafts inside. But I was trying to get through the hail core just to get to the tornadic portion of the storm. I do love hail though too. I've never filed an insurance claim, but I do get the loss damage waiver, of course, but there is a lot of fine print in those waivers. But this is big hail with a supercell storm, West Texas, softball size. I've got my gas station sunglasses on, I put the visor down. I have seen giant hail here in Fort Smith with that supercell in April. I believe it was April 10, 2022. But you get a lot of big hail here. You can see sometimes the hail is just too dense and you can't quite get through. This is all because of the mesocyclone above it, the rotating updraft, and it can suspend hail baseball and softball size. And this is my daily driver, the Dominator 4. And I call it the Dominator 4 because it looks like a golf ball. And it actually gets better gas mileage when it's dimpled like that. but I got this in 2018, and the hood has dents upon dents on it. Those gashes are actually from Hurricane Ian, roof tiles that were flying through the air at 175 miles an hour. And I lost that original Subaru to the storm surge of Hurricane Ian. That was about 10 to 15 feet deep when I was chasing that near Category 5 hurricane. So I towed it out many weeks later just to keep the hood because I love the hail dents in the hood. And then I got a flood refurbished Subaru last year for $2,000. I mounted the hood onto it. I blew the motor out on that on June 2nd near the Silverton tornado. And this is actually the third generation of the Dominator 4. And you know you chase hard when you have to tow the vehicle home. This actually happened about 2 weeks ago in the Oklahoma Panhandle, and we saw a tornado that day and got in this hail core for like 20 or 30 minutes. You could see all the dents, the shredded front light, and I've never sustained windshield damage quite this severe. We were basically wearing the windshield like a tuxedo on this one. This is what the storm looked like. Whenever you see that green coloration in the storm, we call that greenage. That means that it's holding a lot of ice in the updraft, and the sun that comes in gets refracted, and that gives you that green coloration.
Legendary Gorilla Hail Core.
This thing's gonna go crazy. It's gonna shred the vehicle. The tornado usually is buried up in the core there.
What?
Do circulation for me right here. You can see that inflow band feeding into the circulation, the cigarette cloud there. And we saw the tornado deep in the hail core. A lot of times you'll get softballs that wrap around the tornado cyclone. That is a big rotating updraft above it. Massive hailstone. You can see it hitting the ponds there. A lot of times they happen on the back side of the mesocyclone and they get ejected out the back of the updraft. But also they're in the Bears cage a lot of times, which is that area just to the north side of the mesocyclone, where you get giant hail. See my gas station glasses on. That's our best safety equipment. And I've chased for almost 30 years now. When I got my driver's license at age 16, I started storm chasing up in Michigan. But my mom didn't let me at first. I had to sneak out to storm chase for a couple of years. And then I went to the University of Oklahoma in 1998 and saw my first tornado, October 4 of 98, actually during a fall season outbreak. And it looks like we might have another fall season event, maybe in about 10 days, around October 21st or 22nd. I was just looking at the long range model, so could be here, maybe a little bit further north, up near Omaha, but we're keeping a very close eye on that. But I've seen a lot of crazy things over 30 years of storm chasing, including a flying cow. And I saw this in eastern Wyoming in 2018, just like the movie Twister. You'll be able to see it orbit as it's getting pulled around by the tornado. And I was also in a rental car on this chase, and I was about 12 miles away from the tornado when it first touched down, and I got a flat tire in my rental car on the canyon roads of Wyoming. So I had two choices. I could fix the tire and miss the tornado, or drive on the rim for 12 miles, and that's exactly what I did to get up to this tornado. I drove on the rim in the rental car, and then it started retrograding back to me. I saw a cow flying through the air, and hail started coming out of the back of the storm and blew all the windows out again. And then I came up to a destroyed farmhouse, and a rancher came out from underneath the stairwell where he took shelter. And he had two giant Siberian Huskies with him. They're all covered in mud. And I said, you can take shelter in my rental car, no problem. And they got in there and just shredded the whole interior of the rental car too. So, but we'll play this one. You can check out this rare video. Watch the cow flying. Tornado. It's the only time I've seen it. And it was reported missing. But there are a lot of updrafts in the funnel too that could potentially lead to a soft landing for the cow. You can see it looks like it's upside down there, 4 legs coming around.
It is possible the cow landed gently due to the updrafts.
But a lot of times those cows get barricaded inside fences when these tornadoes hit. They're just sitting ducks out there sometimes. But the reason why a cow gets lofted is because it's standing on legs. So you have wind going underneath the cow and up and over it at the same time, and it behaves a lot like an airplane wing, where it gets lift and can get lofted. The Dominator doesn't have that. We drop it flush to the ground, and that prevents the wind from getting underneath the Dominator, and that minimizes the lift on the vehicle. And also all the panels are shaped such that we have downward force directed on the Dominator 3 when we're inside of the winds. But I've also chased the largest tornado in history. That was in 2013 on May 31st and near El Reno, Oklahoma. And this tornado was over 2.5 miles wide. I think at 2.6 miles at its widest. And the individual suction vortices in that tornado were up to a 1/4 mile wide. So you had a bunch of suction vortices within, suction vortices on this one. Turn it down a little, please. Thank you. But that whole cloud matter hovering above the ground and spinning cyclonically, that's called the dynamic pipe. It's just really big in this case, probably about a mile or two wide. And that's basically a reservoir of low pressure that's drilling down toward the ground, just like a hand drill. And when it gets within range of the ground, it can accelerate those jet-like vortices that feed up into it. Sometimes when the tornado is so strong, it'll have vertical velocities that trigger those noodle-like horizontal vortices too. That's how you know it's a strong tornado when they have those feeding into the side of them. Those are triggered by the updrafts in tornadoes. Not only are they spinning, but you also have big updrafts and downdrafts around them. You can see those filament-like vortices. But this one also had deviant motion. It did a left-hand turn. And right then was when it expanded to 2.5 miles wide. And I was trying to do a hook slice maneuver, which is when you penetrate through the back of the storm and you go through the rain and hail of the hook, and then you have a clear view of the tornado, and you're usually in the path of it when that happens too. But one thing about a hook slice maneuver is if you get a flat tire or something, you can always just stop the car and then let the tornado move away from you. But in this case, we had the Dominator 1 and 2 on this tornado, and we ran into a power line just when we were about to intercept the west side of the tornado, and it wrapped around the light bar of the Dominator 2, and we couldn't free ourselves from the power lines. They were sparking everywhere, and so we put the car in reverse, tightened up the power line so much that it shot the hood off like a frisbee into the tornado, and we never found the hood again. We drove around with an exposed engine for the rest of the chase. I also saw the second widest tornado in history, the Hallow, Nebraska one. That was on May 22nd of 2004, and that one was 2.2 miles wide. But you can see all the vertical winds. We got really close to some of these suction vortices, but they can spin up in a blink of an eye. Suddenly you can just have this grinder of a suction vortex just peel off the tornado and impact the Dominator. So that's why we built the armored vehicles, so that we can somehow try to measure and verify that the winds can potentially get up to the speed of sound inside of the suction vortices. I also like to chase flash floods, especially out in the desert southwest. And this is one in southern Utah that I storm chased just to the east of Zion National Park. I was working for AccuWeather at the time, and I actually ran along the front wall of this flood. Ahead of a flash flood that's coming down the canyon here, gonna pop up, but that's all logs, rocks, boulders in there. So if that grabs your shorts, it'll pull you down, and you can potentially lose your life in a flood like this. They'll a lot of times go into slot canyons as well. Hikers can be down in there. But the rain that causes this flood a lot of times happens like 50 or 60 miles upstream, picks up all the debris as it comes down. And some of those floods that were in the Texas Hill Country, the debris plug on the front of them was 100 feet tall. Here's one off of a wildfire burn scar. You can ramp the volume up on this one. I get the Taco Bell joke about this one all the time.
Big plug at it! Oh my God! Oh, huge log!
But you can tell the coloration of that one is black because it came off of a wildfire burn scar. The Pine Gulch wildfire up in southwestern Colorado. Those will either be faster moving, have more debris inside of them. But I like to chase these flash floods more for relaxation in the desert, because sometimes you have to wait for a couple of hours until they arrive. And Tim Samaras was a huge mentor and inspiration for our science, and really everybody that's doing tornado science out there. And he built these turtle probes, a very innovative design based on the known shape of the probe, and with those little pressure deficits, he was able to measure the pressure fall inside of tornadoes, and he even measured the world record pressure fall inside of a tornado of nearly 100 millibars. That was on the Manchester, South Dakota F4 tornado. But Tim was a huge inspiration for our science. We had his instruments mounted on the Dominator back then. We're using pitot tube anemometers, which measure the wind based on the pressure difference across the anemometer, and that was also from Tim Samaras. But very sadly, Tim lost his life to one of those suction vortices inside of the El Reno tornado when he was trying to deploy one of those turtle probes on the storm. But his legacy lives on forever. And everybody that's doing science around tornadoes, all the big field projects out there, our self-funded missions are all inspired by Tim Samaras, who was a self-taught engineer. And he even built a high-speed camera called the Big Kahuna for measuring high-resolution imagery of lightning strikes. But the probes, the ground-based probes that Tim developed, led to our science mission initially. We were dropping those ground-based probes in front of tornadoes, and then sometimes the tornado would miss. It would change direction at the last second and miss the probe, and that's why we built a mobile version of the ground-based tornado probe. That's the Dominator 3, so that we can adjust right up until the tornado, so if it changes directions, we can still try to intercept it with the Dominator. But all that was inspired by Steve Green, who developed one of the first tornado interceptors called the Tornado Attack Vehicle. And he had a NASCAR background. He had like a one-piece tornado intercept suit that he brought out. And Joel and I would guide him to the tornado. He would trailer the vehicle, and then he would try to drive in and intercept the tornado. But he kept coming up a little bit short. He said his cameras malfunctioned a few times. And then Joel and I decided, if we're doing this in these beater vehicles, we might as well just build our own Dominator. But the flaps on the bottom were definitely inspired by the Tornado Attack 1 vehicle of Steve Green. And this is Gizmo here, the #1 storm chaser. She was my storm chasing partner for 17 years. And you can see here, we just intercepted a tornado near McCook, Nebraska when this photo was taken. And Gizmo and I were separated from the Dominator 3 when the tornado touched down. It happened a little bit faster than we thought it would. And suddenly I saw this big debris cloud coming toward me from the freshly plowed field. And so the only thing I could do was hide Gizmo in my bread basket. I pointed my back into the wind, and I was getting pelted by corn stalks and everything from the tornado. And then it moved off to the northeast, and Gizmo was totally fine. Probably didn't even know that it happened. But I did get pink eye from that tornado for about 3 months after that. After getting hit by that debris cloud, I had a lung infection. I could barely open my eyes for a while. And that was when we realized that the debris clouds of tornadoes can even be toxic. And the dustbuster tornadoes you see probably have a high fecal content in them. And the Joplin, Missouri tornado of 2011 had flesh-eating bacteria in it, and dozens of people lost their lives from that. So one part of our science mission for next year is going to be to deploy these little pods and then measure the air quality inside of tornadoes and see how toxic they really are. But Gizmo saw over 250 tornadoes during her career. She chased a Category 5 hurricane as well, and she loved chasing floods out in Utah. She had a lot of friends in the storm chasing community as well. This was the time we almost got struck by lightning. You can see our hair was standing up here. Gizmo knew we were in danger. She was looking at the photographer, but I was totally oblivious to the threat. But that's from the electric field of the storm. And if that ever happens to you, you definitely want to get indoors because you might be about to get struck by lightning. This is Gizmo when I came back from a hurricane. But she went to all 48 states as well. She chased tornadoes in Canada. But sadly, Gizmo passed away about a month ago. There she is. So I didn't always have the Dominators. My first storm chasing vehicle was a 1985 Plymouth Reliant up at the upper left. And I grew up in Michigan, so I had to chase lake effect snow squalls in Michigan storm chasing. I tried to get to there, but Lake Michigan a lot of times will dissipate the storms. So I moved to the University of Oklahoma in 1997 to study meteorology. And then I got that Chevy Lumina on the upper right. And that one was held together by duct tape. And I drove it about 35,000 miles without changing the oil. And then finally the engine blew out near the Kansas-Oklahoma border on the way back from a chase in Minnesota. And we just scratched up the VIN number and walked away from the car at that moment. Those are the Dominators on the bottom. And we started working with Discovery Channel Storm Chasers series. And that made it possible for us to do science and build those vehicles. That's the Dominator 1 on the right. Dominator 3 is in the middle and right there. And that's the Dominator 2 on the left. And the Dominators were built by Kevin Barton, who was a mechanic at the golf course that I worked at. And he also made race cars for the dirt tracks up in Michigan. but Kevin was the only one with the skills and the creativity to build the Dominators. And they're based on the shape of the armor, 16 gauge steel, and Line-X protective coating on the outside. We shot a 2x4 at the Dominator when it was just steel with an air cannon, and the 2x4 went right through the steel into the cabin of the Dominator. So we added the Line-X on the outside, which is a polyethylene Kevlar composite. And we drop the armor flush to the ground so no wind can get underneath. But the Dominator 1 does not have a spike system. We only added those to Dominator 2 and Dominator 3. But I probably intercepted the most tornadoes in Dominator 1 until the last 3 years when I got the Dominator 3 back. We've been intercepting tornadoes like crazy the last 3 years. And I actually lost the Dominator for about 10 years. My friend Sean had it up in Canada, and then he went through a divorce 3 years ago, so I saw opportunity in that and was able to get it back. But I've actually paid for that for about 3 times, I think. But we have it back now, doing science with it. And our plan is to build a Dominator 5 that is shaped like a flying saucer, so that we're not as vulnerable from a side wind like we are with the Dominator 3. I started off as a science nerd. I was inspired by my mom, who taught science in middle school, 6th and 7th grade. And I didn't go through puberty until about age 25, so I did things like insect collecting, played the oboe. I was an Eagle Scout as well. But here's my bug collection. I lost and skipped at the time. There's Gizmo. But my true passion was always severe weather and storm chasing. All I wanted to be was a storm chaser since the age of 5. And all of that was from my mom, who taught 6th and 7th grade science, got me into the sciences. And I loved insect collecting, but I retired from that when I caught an eastern Hercules beetle in 1996, which is like the holy grail of insect collecting. There's my mom, and she was against storm chasing at first due to safety reasons between the age of 16 and 18. And even after my freshman year at the University of Oklahoma, after we survived that F5 tornado near Bridge Creek underneath the overpass, she still didn't want me to storm chase the summer that I came back, but I ended up going anyway, and then she's been very supportive of it ever since. And I even got to show her a tornado about 10 years ago. I went to the University of Oklahoma for 17 years, continuously enrolled. I was doing a lot of storm chasing, so almost drank it out for 20 years, but they eventually showed me the door. But my mom came down for graduation about 10 years ago in 2015, and she landed in Oklahoma City, and I told her, we're going storm chasing. And she's like, no, we're not. Take me back to the hotel. And I said, don't worry, we're not going to see anything. And we ended up seeing this crazy multiple vortex tornado. And you'll definitely hear the roar of this one too. Every time a suction vortex forms, it ramps the winds back up. You can turn this way up. You got to hear my mom's commentary. See the vortices there? That was my hat. I got sucked into the tornado.
Be careful. Jesus Christ. Oh my God!
There's the roar. She didn't like the noise. She had Gizmo on her lap.
Reed?
Give me the camera.
You're not safe? What the hell are you doing?
But she had Gizmo on her lap in the back seat, so listen to what she says at the end.
No. You're not safe? What the hell are you
After
doing?
this.
Okay.
I promise. I got this under control.
Gizmo did a dingleberry.
Like, Gizmo really did, and Gizmo was used to those situations, but she was trying everything she could to end the chase, including Gizmo's dingleberry, and we kept chasing it off to the east and turned into a big wedge tornado. So that F5 that we saw freshman year, that was May 3rd, 1999, and that is known as the strongest tornado in history because the 308-mile-per-hour wind was measured just above the ground by the mobile Doppler radar. And we had 5 of us freshman meteorology students packed in a soft-top geo-tracker, which I think is a collector's item now. We can play this one. I thought the geo-tracker was going airborne here, but somebody had the bright idea to abandon the vehicle and run to the overpass. This was before the research came out that the winds are accelerated underneath an overpass. There was a family freaking out beneath the overpass. And watch the left edge of the tornado. That's how you line it up for intercept. You can see in this case it's actually moving left to right. So we're actually not in a good spot to intercept this. But I didn't know how to line them up yet at this time. But that's an F5 right there. Moving at about 20 or 30 miles an hour. And if I was in the Dominator 3, I would have been about an eighth of a mile up the road, shooting rockets into the tornado, parachutes would pop, and then all that data would stream into the Dominator, and we could get a real-time tornado intensity estimate. And you can see it missed us, but we still had a lot of wraparound coming around, insulation falling out of the sky. And then we came into Moore, Oklahoma right after this and saw the dark side that the tornadoes leave behind and the extreme damage. We saw horses meandering in the middle of the highway, people emerging from their homes to total destruction. And that was our first time doing search and rescue as well after the tornado. And then we did Storm Chasers in 2006 and 2007 with licensed footage to the show, and then they would put Sean Casey's voice over top of it. And then in 2008, they reached out to us and asked if we wanted to be a part of the series. And we were paid $12,000 the first year for Storm Chasers. And then the ratings were good that first season, so then we were able to get a science budget from Discovery, and that allowed us to build the Dominator 1 and Dominator 2 and 3. But they actually didn't want us to build the Dominator. They wanted us to be the underdog team, just deploying ground probes from a regular vehicle. So we did it anyway, and we built the Dominator the off season after our first season, and just showed up with a red shoe on the first day of filming. And we didn't have the insurance in place to intercept tornadoes. Sean Casey still had the paperwork in place, but we just intercepted anyway that whole entire first year. And this is one of the promo shots that they did. They had us outside of the Dominator for some reason, with a big high-powered fan coming in. But I promised if we were intercepting a tornado, we'd all be inside of the protected Dominator. And here's some of those trailers from the first couple of seasons. This is when we were deploying a ground-based probe. Sean Casey drove the TIB, or Tornado Intercept Vehicle. That's the other interceptor.
Yeah.
And this is when we were dropping one of the Tim Samaras-like ground probes in the path of a tornado.
Yep, I watched this episode.
Yeah, that was when I first realized that was a spaz when I saw that on television.
On the season finale.
And this was the second one, the first season with the Dominator.
This is the moment they
Tim Samaras was in this season as well with the Twist X team.
This is where it all comes together.
And this is when we got inside a bunch of tornadoes.
You put yourself in the wrong place at exactly the right time.
It's gonna be intense, you guys.
And that window blowout happened in the Dominator 1. We used to have to manually lift the polycarbonate windows, which are the debris-resistant windows. And that tornado had intensified while we were inside. The winds ramped up to 138.8 miles an hour and then blew out the side window. And I'll show you all the data that we collected from that intercept and the parachute probe data that we collected as well. But we also did a Bud Light commercial during our time at Storm Chasers. We got to save a beer truck.
When suddenly everything changed.
Wait, I've got something. It's right in the path of a tornado.
Great Plains Bud Light Rescue.
Here we go.
Thunderstorms will produce a tornado with 90 minutes moving east.
All right, go, go, go.
We're in the Dominator.
We're gonna save these beers.
Saved them. And we also did a Mythbusters test of the Dominator 1, but we only did this after our first season. We never tested the Dominator 1 before intercepting. You're supposed to follow a scientific method and test the vehicle out and see the maximum weight that it can handle before you intercept the tornado. But we didn't have time to do that. We picked up the Dominator in Michigan from Kevin Martin and then just drove right into our first tornado near Kirksville, Missouri on May 13, and then had that window blowout on June 17 of 2009. But we did get a chance to test the Dominator after the season behind a 747 jet. So we ramped the winds up to 300 miles per hour. You can see the TIB on the right side behind the other engine. He had augers, so he could screw the augers into the ground, so he was anchored down. I probably would feel more comfortable intercepting an EF5 in the TIB than the Dominator, but we wanted to retain our mobility. We wanted to be quick moving out there because we figured if we couldn't drive to the Tornado, we can't intercept it. So that's why we made the Dominator very mobile. But you can see that the concept worked. When the wind ramped up, it's almost like the Dominator is getting compressed into the ground as the downward force was getting directed around it, and that's because of the shape of the outer armor. You can even see chunks of ice getting thrown at the Dominator, almost like debris. But you can see it compress, that's the downward force getting directed, and there's no wind going underneath it because of the flaps, so we have a lot less lift on it. But it worked overall by not going airborne, but it did slide across the ground. So that's why we added spikes to the Dominator 2 and the Dominator 3 that come out at a little bit of an angle, and that provides some grab to the ground when we deploy the spikes.
Violet Tornado.
This one was from 2013. After Storm Chasers was canceled, we did our own series called Tornado Chasers. That's the Weather Channel vehicle that was rolled in the El Reno tornado.
My bed's beautiful.
100-yard ride of my life. My life's actually.
I just grabbed the patch, dude.
I'm good.
They came up to them and they exposed the engine after that. 2013 also had the last EF5 tornado, May 20.
Chasing in Oklahoma is the most violent of the violent. That's why Reed is here.
Hi, I'm Reed Timmer, proud new member of the Fort Worth Storm team. They have helicopters in the air, as you know, ground teams. It's almost like watching a football game when severe weather happens in Oklahoma and here in Arkansas.
Tornado watch until 10 p.m. tonight.
Real consequences.
You see the writhing gun there? And
We had Jim Cantori out with us on the
very
street.
soon. Hey, it's Cantori, man. Right in the town of Edmond, Oklahoma.
We got to drive Jim into the tornado.
Not right here, the debris too big.
We watched the vertical winds inside of these tornadoes too.
Oh my God, it's a large blast.
This was an EF4, May 19, 2013.
This is bad damage.
But as Storm Chasers, the second we see damage, we get a Storm Chase and do search and rescue.
This one is coming right at us.
That's one of the strongest tornadoes I've seen near Bennington, Kansas.
Dude, we gotta go.
Air cannon there. I end up ripping my pants on that barbed wire fence. I'm a little sensitive to adrenaline, if you haven't noticed. Just have a cup of coffee and this happens.
See the tornado coming down.
But look for the sinking air around the tornado.
Oh, helical vortices.
Helical vortices.
Violent tornado right over. See the helical. Windows up. Go. We're going inside. We're going inside. We're in it, guys. We're in it right now.
See a tree get lofted here. Whenever we yell drop it down, we never seem to drop the vehicle down, but the best thing to do is get in the path of the tornado, and then we drop the hydraulics, we put the spikes into the ground, and then just let the tornado move over us. If it's a really strong tornado, then I might bury the Dominator 3 in the ditch, because that decreases the relative height of the Dominator relative to the surrounding ground. This tornado happened in 2022 in Andover, Kansas, and I shot this with a drone. I was also in a rental car on this day, but I forgot that I launched the drone and then just drove after the tornado in my rental. But I went back the next day and was able to recover the drone to get this footage. And it shows those jet-like vortices feeding into the dynamic pipe. You can see that base of the low pressure bulb there that's spinning cyclonically. And once it gets within range of the ground, it excites those purely vertical jet-like vortices right into the base of it. I was also streaming this tornado live on Facebook, and the fire chief was watching it. It didn't have a tornado warning yet because it was so close to radar, and he saw on my stream homes getting destroyed, and he sounded the sirens out there in Andover. I heard the sirens start going off here, and nobody lost their lives in Andover from this tornado. But there's that jet-like vortex, and then when the dynamic pipe is trying to plant, it wraps that vortex around it, and that's when you get that helical vortex configuration that happens. And you can just see the cyclonic spin of the dynamic pipe is trying to drill down towards the ground. And when it fully plants, that's when it turns into a mature tornado. They can have an eye in the middle of them as well, or suction vortices. But that one is a purely jet-like vortex. And the tornado usually happens underneath the mesocyclone, If you have a storm that forms with no wind shear, it'll go straight up and then rain on the updraft and then collapse and dissipate. But if you have wind shear in there, it gives that updraft a lean and also a spin, and that separates the downdraft where all the rain and the hail falls from the updraft and allows it to be more long-lived and organized. And the updraft is a lot stronger, so it makes the hail bigger, the wind stronger, and you can get tornadoes on the south side of them if the low-level wind shear is oriented perfectly relative to the storm motion. But we have to get north to south through that hail a lot of times to gain visual of the tornado, so that's why I have to, not on purpose, go through all those hail cores. Here's what it looks like on a radar image, and when I'm doing a hook slice maneuver, I'm going from west to east through that hook to gain visual of the tornado that's usually right at the tip of the hook. You can see a debris ball there. And if you're launching a rocket into the tornado, you want to be right in that inflow notch that's all feeding toward the low pressure. And you also want to be very close to the tornado, because then that northerly inflow into the tornado will pull the parachute probe into the vortex. But there's a lot of sinking air around the tornado that we have to penetrate, so that's why we use rockets and our air cannons or get inside of the tornado, because if we don't get through that sinking air, then the parachute will just get deflected into the ground. Some tornadoes don't have multiple vortices, but I think most of them do at some point in their life cycle, and that's because they're interacting with the friction of the earth. You have that lower boundary condition there, and that's where all the action happens. And even the strongest winds happen right at the ground, and that's because of the suction vortices that happen. The lowest pressure falls and the strongest winds happen right near ground level in most tornadoes. And they're also surrounded by that sheath of sinking air. A fully mature tornado will be like that donut shape with an eye on the inside and maybe some sinking air in the middle of the tornado. And they exist in all shapes and sizes. Usually they form first as a bowl-shaped funnel with a ground circulation, and then as they mature, they'll turn into a cone tornado or a stovepipe or a big barrel tornado. And then when they dissipate, they usually rope out, like on the bottom right, and that's as that sinking air chokes the tornado off from the mesocyclone. This is a tornado that I saw in Manitoba, Canada in 2007. And I was chasing this one in a Hyundai Accent with a maximum speed of about 55 miles an hour. Started off as a cone tornado, expanded, and then as it intensified and expanded really large, it threw it out of balance. The wind curved in toward the center of the tornado, and it split it up into those 3 to 5 suction vortices there. I should have seen Canada's first F5 tornado as well that happened the day before this on June 22nd, 2007. But I made a detour to check out the prairie dog towns on my way up to Canada and ended up missing the first F5. This one happened the day after that. The setup the day before wasn't even that favorable, but we ended up chasing this tornado on June 23rd, 2007. Probably should have been an F5 as well, but this one was rated an F3 tornado. And we rate the intensity of tornadoes using the Fujita scale, or the enhanced Fujita scale now, which is what the millennials turned it into. And we haven't had an EF5 tornado since May 20, 2013, until this year on June 20, that Enderlin tornado was upgraded to an EF5. But I think there have been a lot of tornadoes at EF5 intensity. They just haven't hit sufficient quality engineering at peak intensity. But this recent upgrade, they took other things into account, like that full tanker car of the train and the vegetation analysis. So there is some hope that maybe they'll go back in the data set and upgrade some of those really strong tornadoes. I know the Bologna, Arkansas tornado probably should have been an EF5 as well, that Mayflower tornado. I was also chasing that one many years ago. There are lots of tornado alleys across the world, but this area gets more tornadoes and more severe weather than anywhere in the world, and that's because of the stationary geographic features. You have the Rocky Mountains to the west, the gradually sloping terrain of the Great Plains, and the Gulf off to the south. That's the heat and moisture source, and those aren't going anywhere. So I think that Tornado Alley and Dixie Alley will always continue to be active unless things totally change. But you also have a Tornado Alley down in South America, the Pampas of Argentina there, just to the east of the Andes Mountains. I've actually chased down in Argentina 2009 and 2010, and the tornadoes spin the opposite direction down there, and they're on the north side of the storm instead of the south side. And the gas station food is much better down in Argentina. I haven't been out to China yet to chase, but I bet they've got some really strict rental car policies out there, so may not make it out that far. But some of the biggest tornadoes anywhere in the world happen in Bangladesh, when the jet stream splits around the Himalayan plateau during about a 2-week period, and you can get some of the biggest tornadoes anywhere in the world in Bangladesh. I do also chase hurricanes, but hurricanes are a little bit complicated because you really need to get right in that dirty side eye wall as it's making landfall. And when that comes ashore, you'll get a tsunami-like wall of water called a storm surge that accompanies it as the winds are piling up the water and the low pressure kind of bubbles up the water. So this is what will happen to you if you try to get those strongest winds in a hurricane, because that's where they're coming off the ocean. The friction is a lot lower there. So if you want to get those 175-mile-per-hour winds, you need to be right there on the beach when that eye wall comes in. And this is actually Hurricane Ian here, near Category 5 intensity, but I was right there in Pine Island, right where that right eye wall was coming in, the dirty side of the storm. And this is the storm surge that resulted. I was running a live stream and everybody thought that I broke into this house because of the storm surge, but it ended up coming up like 10 to 15 feet here, had waves on top of it. You'll get floating clumps of fire ants that float by. You can get oil tankers coming off the Gulf. So it's not a guaranteed survival, even if you're in a really sturdy, stilt home like this. But it's the only way to cover the hurricane from the dirty side of the storm where that eye wall comes in. You have to get above the level of the storm surge. But it's a much bigger storm. You can't really comprehend the curvature of the winds at ground level quite as much. And you're just embedded in it. And a lot of times you get in a survival situation when you're chasing hurricanes. But this is what the 175-mile-per-hour winds look like in the eye wall of a hurricane. And if you get in the middle of it, you can see the clear blue sky, and then you can see the stadium effect, and you can actually see the curvature of the winds. But look at the storm surge, 10 to 15 feet deep. I saw the Subaru float by. You can see over there on the left. Chris Florida Tornado's vehicle was destroyed too. There's a lot of salt water out there. But we were trapped on Pine Island for a couple of weeks. We were doing search and rescue, helping get the elderly off the island. The Army was doing helicopter takeoffs. And then finally I called my friends at the United Cajun Navy and rode out by an airboat after a couple of weeks. But when you're chasing a hurricane, a lot of times it turns into a survival situation like this. And Hurricane Katrina, I chased 20 years ago now. I was 25 years old chasing that one, and I was going down there with my friend Simon Brewer of Stormgasm.com, and all these reports were coming in as we were driving down in a Honda Accord to chase Hurricane Katrina, that the winds would be so strong that small vehicles would fly through the air, that kitchen appliances would be flying around, and that there would be a toxic flood with fire ants floating on it. So we were a little bit worried, of course. But we got down to Slidell, Louisiana, and we were trying to get to Mississippi to get the eye wall where it came in and made a perpendicular angle to the coastline. And we ran into this rusty dump truck that was trying to run us off the road. And next thing we know, we're in a high-speed chase, just like Jeepers Creepers, with this crazy rusty dump truck. We thought he was trying to run us off the road and steal our camera equipment or something. But then we saw police coming in the distance after 20 minutes of this high-speed chase with a dump truck. And we thought that they might save us from our situation, so we flashed our lights at them. And when they pulled up, they did a sideways slide, and 5 officers got out and pulled their gun on me. And so I put my hands up. I said, "I'm just a storm chaser." But they weren't listening to me, of course, pulled me out of the car, and the dump truck was parked right there. And the chief of police got out, face was all red, and he started roughing me up against the car. And it was a huge misunderstanding, but he actually thought we were looters. They had a report of looters in Slidell, and he came out in his dump truck to take care of it, and we thought he was trying to kill us, so we ran away. We thought we were the bad guys, but they put us in jail for a couple of hours, and then he came back, and they realized they made a huge mistake. They let us out, but by that time, the water was already 5 feet deep and rising. We waded out to the Honda Accord and got a bunch of Vienna sausages that we had for survival. And the water rose about 15 feet. All these fishing boats came. And then we hitchhiked for 2 days out of the damage zone in Katrina. And we had no cell phone coverage. My mom filed a missing persons report. But we hitchhiked for 2 days and then finally got out of the disaster zone for Hurricane Katrina. But that's how hurricane chasing goes oftentimes. And that's why we base most of our science mission around tornadoes and the multiple vortices of tornadoes. It's getting more difficult to chase hurricanes as well because all the media people go out there, a bunch of storm chasers, they rope off the beach. So I think I'm probably going to be chasing tornadoes in the outer bands of the hurricanes and maybe the inland flooding impacts from hurricanes in the future. But this is the design of our science mission for tornadoes that I made many years ago. You can see I made the multiple vortex tornadoes out of Microsoft Paint. And they all have that cake just above the ground. That shows that they're interacting with the friction of the earth and splitting into those multiple vortex tornadoes. And then they happen to look just like the Greenfield, Iowa tornado that happened last year with all those vortices inside. But our science mission, the goal is to get a three-dimensional X-ray of the tornado, the wind speeds, thermodynamics, pressure inside of the tornado, and we drive into it with the dominators to measure the surface wind data. And at that time, we're also shooting rockets into the tornado that contain a miniaturized sensor, and a parachute pops just above the ground, and they get carried up through the tornado. And we're also doing ground-based probes that we call lawn dart sensors. Will Clay 25 is our Tim Samaras, our extreme engineer, and he is making all of this research equipment for us. And we want to get dozens of sensors into the tornado at the same time, just like the movie Twister. And then we can have all of this data stream back to the Dominator live, and then we can get a real-time tornado intensity estimate as the sensors are flowing around in the tornado. But the reason we need rockets is to get through the sheath of sinking air around the tornado. So we shoot it at the tornado and then the parachute pops. Tornado, pocket of sinking air around the vortex. And once inside, it pops off and the parachute deploys and it's carried around inside the vortex, just like the movie Twister. And we've got to get after the rocket. So as the probe is getting carried around inside of the tornado, we're immediately getting live data like this. We've got pressure, relative humidity, we've got IMU acceleration. That's at 1 time a second. And we even have the data of exactly how the sensor is tumbling around in 3D. But right now, we're only getting live data at 1 time per second. But we actually have to recover the physical sensor to get the super high resolution data. But for the Lawrence to Linville EF4 tornado, the tornado carried it over 26 miles away from where we launched it. Mark, how is the rocket in the tornado right now? This is the first rocket we got in. How high is it? 2019? 10,000. 10,000? 10,000 feet? No. And Mark is actually reading off the live data from the sensor as it was going around that EF4 tornado. I'll show you all the data and that launch as well. These are the lawn dart probes, though, that Will has designed. And this is based on Tim Samaras' pitot tube anemometer design. It's got holes in the top of it. And we're going to drop these from an FPV drone into the ground, spiking in a grid configuration ahead of the tornado.
But sort of. He is, but like, you get what I mean.
Why it looked like a mortar. So I didn't see in Ukraine.
Hitting lawn darts like Tiger Woods.
It'll drop off and then spike into the ground. And then we'll read wind speeds from it, so surface wind.
So that will measure the pressure at the surface and the winds. And the hardest data set to collect is right at the ground and aloft in the tornado. When you have a mobile Doppler radar, for example, it's scanning up at an angle, so it's measuring winds above the ground, and the relationship between winds above ground and those that happen right at the ground is a big mystery of tornado science. That's why we built the Dominators to measure the surface wind data. And the first Dominator was built on a 2008 Chevy Tahoe. And that's the first vehicle that I purchased using a bank loan. I got insurance on it, and then immediately turned it into the Red Shoe, and didn't tell them about it, of course. And our first intercept was June 17 of 2009. That was when the window was blown out. You can see I have a little bit of ketchup on my face there. And on that day, we were deploying a drone with a 15-foot wingspan. It had parachute probes up in the base of the plane, so we could fly it and then drop the parachute probes into the inflow of the tornado. And the plan was to have them ride the inflow all the way back to the tornado. But this is a very important part of our science mission, because once the probes got right near the tornado, they hit that sinking air and got deflected straight into the ground. So this led us to use rockets and air cannons. But Discovery Channel didn't want us to use combustion engines. So once that series was canceled, that's when we let it rip with the rockets. It's coming down! But at this time, June 17, 2009, we were trying to intercept the tornado with the Dominator 1. That's where we had the window blow out. And then we had a team out here flying our RC aircraft to drop the parachute probes into the tornado. Sean Casey would see our airplane flying through the air when he was trying to intercept, and he threatened to shoot it down a few times.
Did you hear what he
But
said?
I got a letter in the mail from the FAA threatening $1 million fine after this episode aired for commercial use of a drone. I think I was the first one to get a letter for that. But you can see the parachute probes riding toward the tornado. We thought it was going to work, but then as soon as they got close, they just went straight into the ground. But at this time, we were intercepting the tornado in the Dominator 1. And it was a weak tornado initially, but it intensified with us inside. There you can see the nipple funnel coming down, already at a ground circulation. But I thought this was going to be a weaker tornado, so I kept the windows down even. And then at the last second, I rolled up the regular window, and then a suction vortex came around the backside of the tornado and hit us. It's always the suction vortices that cause problems. That was actually Joel in his red truck. They said that he quit the team, but he was always out there storm chasing still.
Here's popping.
But you'll see the suction vortex on the left side of the screen.
We're inside.
You'll hear it at least.
All right, turn it left. All right, we got it.
And that was as the winds ramped up from 70 to 100.8 miles per hour. You can see the suction vortices dancing around in there.
We're inside it right now. Look at
You'll
this.
see a pressure wave on the ground coming.
All right, turn it left. All right, here you go.
They like the form of the backside of the tornado, I've noticed. And that's the sound of the window blowing out there. The radar engineer in the back seat of the Dominator, just before the window blew out, our camera guy saw a stream of blood coming out of his ear, and he said, "Nick, your ear's bleeding." And that was from the pressure fall was so intense that it burst his eardrums inside of the tornado.
That's crazy.
And that's actually Tim Samaras parked on the left side of the road. He was always very concerned about our safety out there. And I ran up and talked to him, and he gave me a Band-Aid right here. And then he raced east of the tornado and deployed his turtle probe in the path of that, collecting some more amazing data. One more. So the max wind we measured in that suction vortex was 138.8 miles an hour. The blue dots there are wind speed. And overall, it was a weaker tornado with like 60 to 70 mile an hour winds. And then in less than a second, it spiked up to 138.8 miles per hour. And that's consistent with the computer simulations of tornadoes as well that show that the winds in those suction vortices could be 2 to 4 times that of the main tornado. It was rated EF2, but definitely had EF3 winds inside of the suction vortex. So that's why we added a spike system and an automated window lift system for the Dominator 3. And we have 2 layers of polycarbonate windows. The insert windows are polycarbonate and the exterior windows. We also added spikes to the bottom of the Dominator 3. And it's based on a diesel Ford F350. We have a new turbo and DCR fuel injector in there that we added since the Greenfield, Iowa day. So that Dominator can go about 115 miles an hour. But of course, we always go the speed limit when we're chasing. But we also have the rocket launcher on the roof. That feeds into a little joystick and a big red button so that we can launch the rockets at the tornado. But you have to drop back into the Dominator to launch because it creates a smoke trail up to the tornado and storm, and lightning likes to strike along those smoke trails. So that's how we pop back into the Dominator. And we also have that Tupperware receiver that Mark is holding out the window. That's sending live data as the sensor is flowing around inside of the tornado. We have had some problems on intercepts, including last year near Custer City, Oklahoma. We were chasing a rain wrap tornado and had a hydraulic spike failure. You can see the tornado was buried in the rain. It's a rain wrap tornado, but it was a mega wedge, which means that it's wider than a mile wide. I'm trying to find the left edge inside of that tornado. And our goal is to get so that the left edge is not moving side to side. That means the tornado is coming right at you. You can see the inflow streaming into the tornado. Still buried back in that rain. And then you'll see the left edge pop out of the rain, a really crisp, smooth left edge. And then we got the hydraulic spike failure. There was a loose wire to the computer. And so I couldn't drop it down, and our backup plan is to just bury the Dominator in the ditch, and that decreases the height of it. But I thought this tornado was going to do that left-hand turn and then occlude and rope out right on top of us and basically drill a hole in the ground. So I panicked a little bit. I always get scared when there's nothing, when it's too late to do anything about it.
Yeah.
I'm always trying to get to the tornado, and then once you drop it down, I get a little worried. But you'll see the left edge pop out of the rain right there. And it's not moving side to side.
We gotta get out of here. We gotta get out of here.
And it was doing that left-hand turn. But anytime you see that really crisp, smooth left edge of a tornado, you know it's really strong. A lot of times you'll have horizontal vortices feeding into it. So we put the car in the ditch here.
Keep moving now, guys.
And we measured about 150 mile per hour winds in this. And I thought they were going to be up near 250. I thought it was going to be an EF5 basically roping out right on top of us. And there you can see the left edge of the tornado. Trees going horizontal. We didn't have any rockets last year, so this would have been a perfect rocket launch opportunity. We could even throw the parachute probes out the window in this situation, and they'll just lift right up through the tornado.
Hang on, we're about to get the strongest.
But we ended up riding it out in that tornado. It didn't quite intensify like I thought it was going to, thank goodness. And then we spent an hour in the ditch. And we missed the Union City tornado, but a storm chaser named Rusty Archer towed us out of the ditch. Our first rocket that we got inside of a tornado happened in northeastern Kansas. We launched it just to the south of Lawrence, Kansas, west of Kansas City. This was on May 28, 2019. And we positioned ourselves right at the inflow notch of the storm. You can see the clear slot wrapping around, and the wedge is buried in the rain just behind us. But you can see the inflow notch. That's exactly where you want to launch the rocket. So I pop back in there, get the igniter set up, and then aim the rocket right at the inflow notch. You hear the siren sounding in Lawrence. There was already an EF3 tornado here, and then it intensified to the EF4.
It's rotating hard. It's coming right at us.
I have to make sure that the igniters are lined up perfectly or it won't launch.
Don't go, Sean. We're good.
I gave no countdown, I just popped it off. And I saw it get pulled into the tornado. I was looking through the rocket seat. It's like a greenhouse in the back seat of that Dominator.
No, hold on, stop. I got it.
And that's Mark getting the live data as the sensor's getting carried around in the tornado. It's coming in at 1 time a second to the receiver. And the probe was moving at 190 miles an hour in the tornado at this time. There you can see the wedge to the east. Getting carried by the winds, and Mark is reading off the altitude data of the probe. It goes above 4,000 meters or above 12,000 feet when we lose signal with it.
We're at 18,000 feet. The rocket's at 18,000 feet.
And I thought we lost the sensor forever. But we posted a picture of it on Facebook the next day, and somebody found it in like 15 minutes, 30 miles away from the launch site in the front yard of a church in Leavenworth, Kansas. And these are the guys, Jeremy and Matt, that found it. And that provided us with the entire data set from the launch all the way until it was ejected from the tornado at 10 times a second. And here is the trajectory of the sensor as it was getting carried through the tornado. The red is the rocket part, and then the parachute popped about 400 feet above the ground and was immediately pulled into the tornado, and then reached speeds of 190 miles an hour as it did 2 loops around the tornado. That's the first loop just to our east. And then it entered the top of the tornado at about 10 or 11,000 feet and shot straight up at 130 miles an hour. That's basically the vent of the tornado before it broadens out to the mesocyclone above it. And you can see it entered the mesocyclone, and then it was ejected out of the north side of the storm before falling down in the front yard of a church in Leavenworth. And we also measured 113.5 millibar pressure deficit above ground inside of the tornado. And the entire weight of the atmosphere above us is about 1,000 millibars. So that's like a 10% drop inside of the tornado with the dynamic pipe. So this was the first time that data was collected inside of a tornado, measured directly in 3 dimensions. And then I tried to submit the paper. I went through a 3-year peer review process with the American Meteorological Society, and they ended up declining it due to safety reasons because we launched our toy rocket too close to a power line. But we went back and measured it all out and showed that it was a legal launch. And then I resubmitted it to the European counterpart, and they accepted it in like a week. So I think I might have had some haters in the peer review process. There you can see the rocket. That's where we launch it. That's the panel in the rocket seat. And those are the miniaturized sensors that do the data collection. And Will is mass producing hundreds, if not thousands of those to launch into tornadoes next year, because one trajectory is great inside of a tornado, but you need to measure the gradients of the thermodynamics, and that requires at least a couple of data points, but ideally we'd have dozens of them flowing around. And as I mentioned, I didn't have the Dominator 3 for many years. That was why I was chasing in the Subaru. I ended up spray painting Dominator into the side of it during the pandemic and then just called it the Dominator 4. But I did get the Dominator 3 back in 2023, and we had a crazy intercept in the Nebraska Sandhill on May 12th of 2023 near Spalding. And this was a perfectly executed intercept because we got in the path of the tornado, dropped the hydraulics, and put 2 holes in the road surface with the spikes going into the ground. And this is a weird tornado too, because it was moving northwest. Instead of west to east, it was wrapping around the north side of a closed upper level low.
Protected in the armored research vehicle, Dominator 3, the team prepares to drive into a tornado. Headed by team leader Reed Timmer,
It's with me.
their goal is to use a subsonic sensor to measure the mysterious pressure drops inside.
And those pressure drops can cause concussion-like symptoms,
Armor and anchoring system.
big physiological issues to the brain, if you haven't noticed.
Of Jordan Hall.
You're gonna show us going in, right? Okay. But I had to go west and then south to get in front of this tornado. Perhaps move up a little bit. A lot of times they have that vertical backside and kind of a more gradual ramp on the
It's a
front.
rare opportunity, over 20 years in the making.
But I could tell it wasn't ripping violently. So I figured, even though it was a big tornado, I figured we could handle it.
It's time to move.
Hey, let's go. Get it perfectly here. But still, the suction vortex vortices can ramp these up to EF5 quickly.
The storm is part of a larger system.
There's the closed upper low.
And this
That's the
particular
supercells moving northwest.
moving east to west.
So now we're in the path of the tornado. You'll see the front wall come through first, and I can feel the back of the Dominator lifting up and down. And then you'll see a cedar tree fly through the tornado, and then even a couch went through. But we had the vehicle deployed, spikes in the ground. But we only have 2 spikes in the front of the Dominator, so the back is lifting up. Then you'll see this couch go by, right there.
Couch.
Lazy boy. And that's the middle of the tornado and everything stops. That's the eye of the tornado. Pressure falls are crazy in there. I'll be gasping for air, concussion-like symptoms in a second. Right there.
It's a perfectly executed intercept.
I think they're having fun.
But I was in a state of confusion for a couple of hours after that. I think because of the pressure fall.
The first intercept by a woman in a Dominator.
Sierra's the only one that wore the helmet. Smartest one of the group.
And a highly photogenic storm, which harmed.
But you can see the sinking air wrapping around the vortex, pinching it off from the supercell. We had 2 holes in the road surface. We filled those up with Flex Seal rubber.
I got the shot here with the dog. We just intercepted it.
But it takes like 15 minutes to lift the spikes back up. So we only deploy if things are getting real serious.
Next, the subsonic sensors recorded a gradual, then massive pressure drop with a quick recovery over 3/4 of a second, meaning there are massive forces at play. Pressure differences in tornadoes can affect sinuses, ears, and possibly even the brain. And teamed up,
And there's the pressure fall, and I actually think it was the abrupt rise right at the end that did all the damage. Because you can see it went up about 75 millibars in a fraction of a second, and that's what happened.
That's
You can see I had the
fake.
horse mouth, I was gasping for air there. Could not think very clearly. And for a
This
couple
is
hours after this, we just drove
pure
back and forth down
comedy.
the road in a state of confusion, looking for our anemometer that wasn't even lost. And we missed a bunch of tornadoes the rest of the day too, so I do think that it causes physiological issues with the brain, blood vessels probably too. And this is a funny meme that I've seen go around. So this year was a crazy year for tornadoes, and I think about 3 years ago, we entered an active 10-year cycle for tornadoes, and it's all related to warm water in the North Pacific called the North Pacific Oscillation. And whenever you get that, you get big troughs that come down into North America, and I think what we're seeing are these 10-year cycles in tornadoes and in hurricanes. I've only seen a couple of shifts in my 30 years of storm chasing, but I think it happened 3 years ago, and that's why we've had these crazy tornado seasons with nearly 2,000 tornadoes in the United States each year. We saw 96 tornadoes in 2024, 65 tornadoes in 2023, and I think we saw like 75 this year, and those are the three biggest years I've ever had, next to 2011. So I think that we're in an active 10-year cycle. The Dakotas went absolutely nuts this year. So when you get La Nina and El Nino in the tropical Pacific, that will determine where the severe weather sets up. If you have an El Nino, it'll be a little bit tighter to the plains, closer to the Rockies. And if you have a La Nina, like it looks like it's about to happen this winter and next spring, that pushes all the severe weather east into Dixie Alley, and you get those fast-moving events like March 14 and March 15 when the tornadoes are moving at 60 miles an hour. This one was in South Dakota. We had over 70 tornadoes in North Dakota this year, which was a record, and the third F5 that happened. But this tornado was near Gary, South Dakota, and we actually broke the Dominator 3 on this chase. I like to scan up to see the clear slot, that little gap of sinking air that wraps around the tornado. I wanted to intercept this. I thought it was moving more north, and it was a wobbler. So when I got close to it, it started wobbling off to the east. You can kind of see how it's dragging the funnel a little bit. So I had to do a 3-point turn in the middle of the road and try to intercept it from the back. And then like 100 Toyota RAV4 just came out of the darkness. And one of them, my friend Connor, tried to slide behind us when we were doing that 3-point turn, and I backed into him, barely felt it, but I ripped his bumper off and dragged it like 600 feet to the tornado. But he's a good friend of mine. They just make those bumpers out of plastic now on those vehicles. But the perfect deployment would have been to be in the ditch right there on the other side of the tornado, spikes deployed in the ground, and we could have handled it. But you get 2 inflow jets at the base of the tornado called ghost trains, and we got in the rear of that right here, and it started pulling the Dominator in toward it. The mirrors bent out, the hood was bouncing up and down, and it opens like that. So if the hood opened up, it would have been a giant parachute just pulled us all the way into the tornado. But I had the brake pressed in, and we were still getting pulled across the ground into that tornado. And then we hit a deer on the way back, and it caved in the entire front end. So Will was able to rebuild the Dominator 3 just in time for our fall tour. We were in Bakersfield, Missouri, just to the north of here. We on March 14, which was that big outbreak that extended down into Arkansas. And we started this storm chase in Mountain Home, Arkansas, and a lot of the Dixie Alley chases out east, Arkansas east, will happen at night. And so we're live streaming this tornado. I'm using wind direction to line it up, and a lot of times you're trying to look for transformer explosions and lightning strikes to try to see the tornado.
It looks intense. It looks almost imminent to me.
But this is moving at 60 miles an hour. They move a lot faster in Dixie Alley as well.
We tweet out a warning to the National Weather Service and pass under the storm as the radar becomes more
That's my
intense.
AI voice.
Sending that tornado warning up to Bakersfield.
Get ready to look out your window now, man. Turn right. So we were paralleling the tornado here, and then Local Man Weather got visual of the tornado for the first time just to our south. But you only get brief glimpses of the tornado at night. You see it actually expanded when it came into Bakersfield, Missouri, just north of the Arkansas border. So we were trying to get in front of it to launch the rocket. And in this case, we lost visual of the tornado. I made a wrong turn in Bakersfield, rolled the window down, and I could hear the tornado and not see it. Debris started coming out of the sky. But if I had gone east out of Bakersfield like we wanted to, we would have driven right into the tornado. And there's Will trying to launch the rocket with his helmet on.
I hear a tornado right now.
but the roar was so loud. When they have a really low frequency roar, it's a bigger tornado, but when they're higher pitched, a lot of times they're more compact. Right here. That's right there to the east.
Snapping back, right in front of us. This is the east option.
And then we ended up hand deploying the parachute probe out the window in that case. We thought that it got carried 20 miles away, but somebody reached out to us and said that they recovered the sensor, that their neighbor said that it fell out of the sky. And we got the sensor back and looked at the GPS data, and it was right along the road, so we think that somebody picked up the sensor after it fell to the ground. We also saw this mile-wide tornado near Morton, Texas, and I guarantee you a tornado like this will give you pink eye if you intercept it. It's picking up all the freshly plowed fields, it's going through that and picking up fungus and bacteria inside, probably worse than that. But we did launch a rocket into this tornado and recovered the sensor the next day. We measured a 250 mile per hour wind above ground inside of a tornado in Weatherford, Texas. You can see the collar clouds, but just because a tornado is big does not mean that it's strong. This one had a pretty broad circulation. And there's another science team called the Otis Project that flew an FPV drone right inside of that, and they found out that it had a hollow inside. It's a pretty weak, broad circulation. You can see the air cannon pointed out the window there. Will's about to launch the air cannon into the tornado. So I wanted to show you this one from last year because it shows the dynamic pipe so perfectly, sinking air all around it.